can I get a mic or a mic and a half? That's the source, oh, my shout out to the editor staff. Yeah, I'm all grown, so much better with math. I need a spread in the Forbes, taking a Benjamin bath. Yeah, I'm serving this track like Steffi Graf. Yeah, Roger Federer, there's no competitor.
Urban Tennis, episode 24, Twin Magic. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's podcast. I'm your host, joined by my co-host.
How do you do?
Pretty good. We're taping this edition of the Urban Tennis podcast on Monday night, so we're a little bit into Rome, but primarily we're going to cover Madrid. We're going to talk about Nadal's victory over Nishikori, how both guys really leave a lot to desire. We're going to talk about Maria Sharapova overcoming Simona Halep and winning Madrid, and talk about her strength on the surface. We're also going to be looking ahead into Rome, obviously, and some of our challenges. And we're going to have a couple of different segments. We're going to look at Federer's twins and tennis kids in general, and looking at Canada's sports network, TSN, the home of Grand Slam tennis in Canada, expanding to 5 national feeds, and the implications of that on Canadian fans. So if you're ready, let's get started with this episode. So Sunday night, Rafael Nadal started off looking exceptionally shaky once again against Kei Nishikori, a player who was dictating play early, got up with an early break in the second, and then Nadal started playing better, and then there was a key point at 4-4. Nishikori turns his ankle, doesn't look the same the rest of the way, and eventually pulls out at 3-0 in the third. Nadal now has captured 4 Madrid titles, but obviously the storyline surrounding Nadal heading into Madrid was his kind of infallibility on the surface. He had lost twice in the quarterfinals in Monte Carlo and Barcelona. People were saying that there was a lot of things they didn't like that they normally liked with Nadal on clay. So I'm going to bring in my co-host now. Now, having seen this final, do you feel better or do you feel worse about how Nadal is playing leading up, obviously, to Roland Garros?
I feel worse in the sense that my outlook for Nadal hasn't improved like I expected it would. I thought Nadal being the final would be, and actually winning, I thought that would be a slam dunk. That means Nadal's back on track. But I think we saw if Nishikori didn't have that unfortunate injury, the match was still definitely up in the air. So there's still, in Nadal, he's still absolutely the best on clay, but it looks like a player at their best can beat him.
Yeah, I think this win for Nadal is maybe the weakest win he's ever had at a Masters title. First of all, let's just look at, there was no Djokovic. He had the wrist ailment. He'll be back in Rome. Federer, who had the twins, he'll be back, obviously in Rome too. Wawrinka went out early. He only had to beat one top 10 player. Obviously Nishikori is now a top 10 player, but Berdych, who he's controlled. And like I said, he was very, very shaky in that final. A lot of tightness. A lot of his returns did not have especially great depth. He was leaving the ball short, so Nishikori was able to stay on the baseline, dictate with his forehand. It was strange to see. It was Nadal wasn't at all, in control of that match until late in the second, and then an injury kind of took away any mystery we had. So I'm still concerned for Nadal that if he does face a top form Wawrinka or Djokovic, maybe not Federer, on clay, I don't think he can beat those guys right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but at the end of the day, I think to really see how the storyline is going to play out, we're going to have to wait until the French Open. People are saying the same thing about Federer coming into this year. Federer's had a pretty strong year, barring a match here or there. So whenever we think like these absolute greats are down on the outs, they somehow seem to find a way back, and we'll see if Nadal does find his way to his peak form at the French Open.
Okay, now moving on to talk about Nishikori, who had a fantastic tournament, reaches his first Masters 1000 event. But once again, he can't hold it together and has to withdraw. He had to do the same thing in Miami after beating Federer, could not play in the semis. We've obviously seen how Michael Chang has influenced Nishikori, how he's matured, and he definitely looks like somebody who's going to stay around the top 10. But do we kind of have to start worrying about the injuries? He's kind of fallen apart a lot of times now. Tweak the back here. You may have the most talent on tour, but if you can't stay on court, you're never going to end up winning those big tour events that you need to do to, kind of propel yourself to that top tier.
Yeah, and I think a key example of that is Juan Martín del Potro. Won the US Open at 21, and then injuries have set back season after season for him. So definitely, yeah, if he's playing his best tennis right now, and it's a little unfortunate he's facing injuries at the same time. So hopefully it doesn't affect him too much when he enters the French Open.
Exactly. He'll have a tough matchup with Gulbis. We'll see if he's able to play and how effective he is in Rome. Okay, let's move on to the women's draw and the women's event. Sorry.
Maria Sharapova was pretty dominant in her win over Simona Halep. And outside of Serena Williams, Sharapova has a very, very good record on clay. So how does Sharapova rank among all-time greats on clay?
I don't know about all-time greats, but currently you have to kind of peg her as the most consistent. She hasn't lost a match on clay to someone other than Serena since the French Open in 2011 when she lost to Li Na. This year she's perfect. It's quite amazing to see how Maria Sharapova has become the best WTA player on clay. Sure, Serena's always going to be the favorite. Li Na's right up there, probably with Maria, but her tenacity on clay is it's great to see. She's at 6'2", she doesn't have a typical, body you would think of a clay player, someone closer to the ground, but she can slide with the best of them. Her plucky, no-quit attitude works well on clay because, points go on forever and she kind of never quits. So it's really been amazing that Sharapova has kind of made clay her service. And if she were to retire today, I'd say, we think of her as a clay. Clay would be her best surface. And that's surprising for somebody who won Wimbledon at 17 and, was destined to be the greatest or one of the best on grass.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially being dominant on clay in the women's game is a little more difficult because, like you mentioned, Sharapova is an outlier. She has so much taller than other players, and other tour players have the build more similar to what you're used to with a traditional clay court specialist. And so we had 4 semifinalists, of course. So we had Sharapova, Halep, and on top of that, Radwanska and Kvitova. Out of those 4, who do you think is a serious contender for the French Open title?
Yeah, I was really excited with these 4 semifinalists. We know what Serena can do on any surface when she's on, so she's the absolute favorite. And then you have Li Na, who's playing great. But of these 4, these are more of the I guess, what we can expect as somebody as a wild card or a dark horse threat. And obviously Sharapova, I think, is elevated her game and is going to be considered one of the 3 favorites. Of the other 3, I'm sticking with Radwanska. I know what Halep did this week, and she looks like she's going to be somebody who's at least a tough Final 8 competitor. But I think Radwanska, oftentimes she puts herself in the best place where she never ends it off properly, but she puts herself in enough spots that I can see her making a semifinal quite easily, and in this case, that might be enough to beat the latest of these 3 other ones.
Yeah, I'm still. Halep did lose in straight sets, but I'm still pretty high on this one.
3 sets. She won the first set.
Yeah. Okay, 3 sets. My mistake. But yeah, Halep has definitely brought her game up a lot this year, so I'm really excited to see more of her.
Moving on, one notable absence in Madrid was Roger Federer, who was back in Switzerland with his wife Mirka as they gave birth to their second set of twins. Just imagine, 2 sets of twins. and it kind of set everything abuzz. UK gamblers started putting odds on the chances of a Roger Federer dynasty down the line at Wimbledon, where his children can be doubles, mixed doubles, and singles champions. But the thing is, tennis children or children of tennis greats don't really succeed at the levels that, say, NBA or NFL players have in the past. So I want to open this up for discussion. Do you think there is a reason for it, or is there something inherent in tennis that prevents children of stars from becoming good tennis players or wanting to be great tennis players?
I think Andy Roddick a few months ago made a good point on the Jay and Dan show, where he mentioned he was making a point of humor that he doesn't want his kids to play tennis or his future kids to play tennis because tennis isn't cool. And that may not necessarily be true. Obviously, Andy Roddick loves tennis and he really, really loves the sport. But I think the point he's trying to get at is that because tennis players start so young, and from the age of 12, they're already in their own individual silos, versus when you're playing on a football team, when you're playing on a basketball team, you have that team, you have that bond of friends that you can always call upon. Versus tennis, you're constantly traveling at a young age, and whatever kids the same age you do meet, you're constantly beating them. So while competitive nature is good for friendships, a nature like that may not be a type of upbringing that a tennis player wants to bring upon their children.
Exactly. And we've heard from many players, past and present, the rigors of this tennis life, the isolation you have to experience, and the kind of challenges you get just being, because it's all the pressure is on you as a tennis player, the relationships or the stressful relationships you have with your parents or your coaches. So when Andre Agassi and Steffi Graf say they don't want their children playing, it's kind of easy to see why there isn't this like transition to the higher ranks. In Wimbledon last year, only Eduard Rogers-Vaslin, a top 100 player on the ATP, had a parent who was also a top 100 player. So, compare that to other sports, those numbers don't even compare. So often, tennis, it's already so hard to do it. And when you have such an influence of your star parents who don't want you to go in the sport just because of the, the difficulty to get to the point where you can be making a living, there's no guaranteed contracts when you get drafted. So I think they're more scared of the damage than the potential success a player can obviously have. But I don't know, this is a little fun here. Do you think any of the Federer kids will become players? Odds are no.
Yeah, definitely odds are no, but I think Federer looks at he's able to look at tennis from a very different perspective than even a guy like Roddick was able to, because he's played tennis at the top level and done everything and won it all. But at the same time, he didn't have that type of upbringing that Agassi's talked about, where he felt like he was forced into the game. So Federer feels like he has love for this game, and I think if his kids want to play tennis, he's gonna let his kids play tennis. Then it's up to the kids if they really achieve in the sport.
Exactly. Okay, moving on to our media and technology segment.
All right. TSN, which is a broadcaster in Canada, which broadcasts all 4 Grand Slams, pretty much more than doubled their number of channels in Canada, which they expect to launch in fall, from 2 all the way up to 5. So with the expanded coverage of channels that they now have, TSN is promising multi-court coverage. Do you think this will be an idea that will take off, and do you think what do you think are some other implications for tennis on Canadian broadcasting?
Well, it's tricky. Right now, the promise is that these channels won't come at any additional cost for the consumer. Now, if that's the case, it's a great move for Canadian tennis fans. You're able, when you have multiple Canadians or multiple great matches going on, you have now the ability to watch it on different channels, something you've never had here in Canada. I know there's instances in the States DirecTV usually runs this, where you can get 6 or 7 different channels of all the show courts. To have that choice and selection, basically, if it comes at the same price. Now, something that could potentially happen is you increase the channels, but then you move tennis down into more of the inferior channels, and that could obviously negatively affect coverage for Canadians who still get it on the main network, which has the widest, obviously, distribution among Canadians.
Yeah, definitely. The media outlets they're going to triumph. The increased coverage is going to be easier than ever to watch all your tennis. But as consumers, you're going to say, yeah, that's great, but we don't want to pay more to watch what we watched before. So there's a lot of skepticism from the consumer side. I think we did see it earlier in Canada with hockey fans. Rogers triumphing that, you're going to watch more hockey ever than before. But people think you're spending $5.2 billion. You're probably going to raise how much I pay for that, right? So I'm hopeful, but I'm definitely taking a wait and see approach until next year's Grand Slams.
And it's a strange time to do it because a lot of, tennis viewing and in terms of all sports is gravitating towards online. And for many years we've had the slams basically giving you additional court coverage anyway. So to just bring it to terrestrial TV is kind of just catching up with what's already happened online with tennis TV and other events like that. Okay, we're almost nearing the end of this edition of the Urban Tennis Podcast, but we like to end with games. And this week we'll have a game of challenges for Rome. Remember, this is Monday night, so Rome has begun, but we're still going to bring our challenges. And my first challenge is for Andy Murray, who obviously has had a struggle since Wimbledon last year with the injury, with just keeping himself sharp. He had one good match in Madrid and then followed up with a bad loss. I want to see consistency here. I know it's not your best surface, Andy, but if you can put together 2 or 3 good matches of good quality tennis, I'm going to start believing in you again, and I think you're going to show to yourself that you still can bring that A-level tennis when you need to.
All right. And my challenge for Rome goes out to Eugenie Bouchard. We saw Bouchard. She already lost in the first round earlier today to Schiavone. I'm going to think of that as an opportunity. I want her to learn from this loss that how you play against a clay court specialist like Schiavone. She may not be a high-ranked player anymore, but she's still dangerous on a surface that she's done well in the past. So she needs to, hopefully she learns from this and plays better against future clay court specialists.
And the final challenge goes out to Sloane Stephens. Sloane, you show us everything in a match when you really want to. Once again, another rocky 3-setter today. I want you and hopefully Serena Williams, if she does end up in Rome, to keep winning and meet in a good third-round matchup, because obviously the sport really looks forward to any time you face Serena, and I think it'd be a great reward just in time for the French Open. Okay, now on to our social media highlight of the week. And this is a more somber moment we chose with recently 30-year-old Elena Baltaka of the UK succumbed to liver cancer. She retired just last November from the WTA. Was one of the more well-liked players on tour. Both tours held a solemn moment, and basically what rose out of it was the hashtag Rally for Bali, which will be a charity event now held in the UK on June 15th. But it was, it's the toughest of moments to do it, but it was a great moment to see the ATP and WTA get together to honor one of the players who really put her entire life, her short, precious life, into the sport and really got everything out of it and helped as many people as she could. Okay? Thank you for listening once again. You can find us on SoundCloud, on YouTube, under Urban Tennis. Keep reading the blog, urbantennis.wordpress.com. This has been episode 24, Twin Magic.
We're twins. We're twins. Yes, sir. I am me. She is she. Except when I pretend I'm her. And when we switch, you can't tell which is which. You don't know who you're talking to. 'Cause we're identical.